morning, good afternoon. Thank you all for registering to our today webinar session. For those of you who do not know me, I'm Irina Cismaș. I'm head of marketing here at Castify, and I'm going to be your host for the following 1 hour. Today here with me is Peter Ord, founder and CEO at GUIDEcx, and father of 4 beautiful girls. Peter, thank you for accepting our invitation and for being my guest today. I look forward to our topic. Before we jump in, I suggest we give it a few more minutes. I also wanna say hello to the people who already joined. Hello, Ruxandra. Hello, Thomas. Hello, Elena, Jennifer, Catherine, Jenna. A lot of names. I'm curious, from where are you joining today? Just use the hello, Ruxandra. Just use the chat bubble. I'm in Bucharest. Peter, you are on East or West Coast? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just chatting away too, so I can encourage the participation. So I'm calling you all from Draper, Utah, just south of Salt Lake City.
Hello, everyone.
New York, Seattle's, Michigan's, awesome.
I wanna, while we are waiting, I wanna ask you, Peter, but also our audience, what's the business challenge that you are facing as we speak? What's the customer success pain that you are trying to solve these days? I have a direct line to you, so I'm gonna ask you to start, and our audience to tap in their answers in the chat box.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. We're customers of Castify. It's awesome to be on this webinar. Irina and I have got to know each other before this call, and it's one of the joys of going on this journey and starting a company like GUIDEcx is meeting people from all the way across the world in Romania and becoming friends with them. And it gives you a greater sense of confidence in humanity, that all people have good in them. And, my advice to everyone is stop watching the news. The world, there's a lot of good in it. To answer your question, I think what keeps me up at night is in a fast growing company, culture is a constant, it's constantly on the top of my mind. I'm one of those believers that culture can be ruined by one person in an organization. And so we've grown from 20 employees to 100 employees in less than 2 years. And that growth will continue to expand. And culture has the ability to significantly accelerate your organization and become a competitive advantage. And so I want to do right by our employees. I want them to enjoy working here. I want them to be friends with one another. I want them to not take offense when no offense is intended. I want them to work with other departments seamlessly. I say that and understand that all those things are easier said than done. Because of that, it has to be an initiative. It has to be an objective. It has to be a focus that we constantly work on and focus on to ensure that we're providing that good culture. So that's what keeps me up at night. Every single employee we hire, right, adds or takes away from the culture. Thankfully, we have amazing people that work for us, and we're all excited to come to work on Monday mornings.
Thank you, Peter, for sharing. For the rest of the people who joined late, we were discussing about current business challenges, current pains, or things that keep us up at night as we speak. Please do share with me. I want to know how we can help. So drop a line and let me know what are your current CS pains and how can we help. I want to share a few housekeeping items and then we jump into the conversation. All the lines are muted for a better listening experience. This is a recorded event, and all of you who registered will receive a recording link after the event ends. And we allocated 15 minutes at the end of Peter's presentation to try to answer to all your questions. And last but not least, I started this webinar series because I wanted to give back to the community, and I wanted to create a place where people can find concrete solutions to their CS problems. So together with my colleagues, I created a dedicated landing page, and I'm gonna actually share it with you as we speak. I'm gonna leave it here. Please go. I encourage you all to go and book a meeting with one of our CS consultants and pick their brain. Ask your questions. Try to find the answers to your pains. I'm sure that my colleagues will help you. This being said, I want to start the discussion about onboarding and the impact it has on the NRR. And as always, I'm going to start it with a poll that I'm going to publish. You guys, I think you are seeing it on your screen. How much of the NRR is influenced by the onboarding process in your current organization? None, less than 50%, more than 50, or do not know. Submit your vote, and we're gonna give it a few minutes for everyone to go and submit the votes, and then I'm gonna pass the mic to Peter. So in this moment, we have 60% do not know and 31% more than 50%. I'm gonna do a disclosure. I was commenting with Peter about the distribution of the votes. Peter, what do you think about the distribution? Does it surprise you in any way? So I think it remains 62 do not know, 29 more than 50%.
I'm not seeing the responses, but it sounds like more than 50% is the winner. Is that what's happening?
It's 62% is we don't know. 61%.
Okay, I see it now.
The majority is we don't know, but we also have 30% is more than 50%.
Got it. Yeah, I think that do not know makes sense because this is a hard thing to measure. It's almost like if you lose a customer, you don't know if they would have expanded, if we would have did them better, or if they would have just stayed flat throughout the whole life cycle. And so, yeah, excited to talk about why the first 30 days of a customer experience can affect the long-term trajectory of what the value of that customer will be worth to you long-term. There's a lot of cool things we can optimize in that first 30-day experience. But yeah, it makes sense. Do not know. We didn't know, but now we personally, our company can attribute, an influx of net revenue retention. We get 90% of our expansion in the first 60 days of the customer experience. And we attribute that to a lot of, the ways we onboard customers, right? We prove ourselves in that first 60 days. And I think it has a lot to do with building trust with the customer. I don't subscribe to the belief that you have to, spend years to build trust. I think trust can be won within, first interactions. And there's some cool strategies we can talk about to optimize that trust equation.
Perfect. I suggest you share the screen. I know that you prepared the presentation for us, but before I have a first question. So did I got it right? You said that the most 90% of the revenue expansion you attributed in the first 60 days. Does it come early in the funnel? I'm surprised. Does it come?
Yeah. So not all companies are exactly alike, but our sales process, our go-to-market motion is very much a land and expand motion. And so our goal is to prove ourselves with small teams within big companies and expand within those companies rapidly. And to do that, right, we optimize our onboarding motion in order to encourage that expansion effort. I mean, I could jump into details. Like one of the things we do that is, I think, very innovative is we have a role in our company called the air traffic controller. If you've ever kind of been in an airport and flown on a plane, which I assume is a lot of you, I think what's unique about airports is you have individuals that sit in towers that are directing planes, and they're telling planes when they can land and when it's safe for them to land. And they're kind of putting the pilots at ease, letting them know that, hey, this runway's open. When you land, you're going to go to this gate. And when you go to this gate, there's going to be a crew that's going to be waiting for you to, make sure that your plane comes in, efficiently, and the bags get offloaded. And so in essence, that air traffic control is telling the pilot that, hey, we're ready for you. So if you take that analogy and apply it to why we call our one of our onboarding and roles within our onboarding organization an air traffic controller, as soon as a deal moves into, we call it a coming in status, meaning that, we've kind of got commitment from the customer. They haven't signed the contract yet, but we're just going through this final last stage of paperwork. We have an air traffic controller in our company that involves themselves with the account executive. And the whole purpose is exactly synonymous with what an air traffic controller would do in a tower at an airport, right? We're putting the customer at ease. We're letting them know that we're prepared for their business, that we have the runway, clear for them to land. And as soon as that contract's signed, we're going to take care of them. And then that air traffic controller passes the relationship off to we call it client experience manager, which is our onboarding specialist.
Thanks for sharing that. I have to admit that I never thought of the comparison with an air controller, but yeah, indeed, it totally makes sense knowing the importance of an air controller in the whole flight navigation process.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks.
So should we kick in with your presentation?
Sure. Yeah. And feel free to stop me.
I'll definitely do.
You've asked me to talk about a topic that's like talking about one of my kids. So I get super passionate about this. Let me share my screen here. Looks like you guys are seeing it now. So yeah, like Irina had mentioned, I'm a father of 4 girls. She called them beautiful girls, so I appreciate that. They get their good looks from their mom, which I'm super thankful about. I'm one of 5 boys, so I don't have any previous experience with girls. All my girls will be teenagers at the same time. So soon we'll have 4 teenagers. My oldest daughter is 10. My youngest daughter is 3. I started GUIDEcx to solve one of my biggest problems. So I guess I'll introduce kind of the concept to you all. At my previous company, we dealt with automotive car dealerships. Very difficult customer to engage. We sold a CRM into that space. And my biggest frustration was engaging our car dealerships after we sold them our product. And there's 3 things that would happen during the experience. The thing that would happen is on our welcome calls, the contract signer would never be on the phone. And so our project management team would be in a position to have to resell the customer side implementation team on what was purchased, because they oftentimes didn't participate in the sales process. And so the education motion of educating people kind of, all right, you signed a contract with our company, helping them understand what the finish line looks like, what our product does. We kind of got in the motion of having to sell and re-educate throughout the implementation experience because of that paradigm of people not being involved in the process. The second thing that was frustrating to me was not knowing who has the ball at certain times during the experience. So helping everyone understand where the responsibilities lie, like who's responsible for what, identifying what type of personas that we need on the customer side, and making sure the customer is assigning the appropriate deliverables that we need assigned to the correct persona in their organization. Meaning if we need an IT manager, or if we need someone who models a process, or if we need someone who can import data on their side. Every implementation experience or onboarding experience is different. But that was a big frustration of mine. We had no thoughtful way to help our customer manage their team and help them understand where the responsibilities lie within their organization, and ultimately hold them accountable to that. And then the third was interesting. It was, when am I going to get the product or service that was purchased? We couldn't answer that question thoughtfully in our previous organization. And I felt like, you know, if I jump forward, and we'll just kind of jump around here. When you kind of look at business to consumer brands, you know, think about a time where you've put your credit card into a website and bought something, and you didn't know when you were going to get that good product or service that you were purchasing. It's very rare today where we buy something online in our consumer lives and we don't know when we're going to get it. I think, you know, these are great brands, right? DoorDash, Amazon, you know, FedEx, Pizza Hut. These brands all do a great job of being transparent after the sale, helping you understand where your package is during the process. I don't blow up Jeff Bezos when my package is late because he tells me it's late. He gives me insight into the process. And I think that's something to be learned, right? When you jump into the B2B space, right, which I understand many of us are in, and we're onboarding software and solutions, being able to thoughtfully answer the question of where are you at in the process, and based on the velocity of the project experience, when are you going to get this good product or service, and how does that compare with what was originally promised? So are they surprised if you're running 5 days late? Yeah, back to the airplane example. I got on a flight the other day, and I had a tight connection in Texas on my way to Florida, and we were 45 minutes late from pulling back from the gate in Utah. And I was getting stressed because, you know, I had checked bags. I didn't know if my bags were going to make a tight connection. And we had a fun thing we were going to do in Florida, and we needed to be there right on time. And the pilot jumped on a loudspeaker and said, "Hey, we're going to be 45 minutes late from pushing back from the gate, but don't worry, we're going to fly faster and we're going to be on time." Right? That last comment like meant a lot to me. It helped me understand that, okay, they have a plan. They're going to burn more gas. They're going to fly the plane a lot faster, and I'm going to make my connection. And so if you're running late, lots of the times it's hard during the implementation experience to know that we're already late. We know we're already late, but it's hard knowing that we're already running late. And so, you know, having a system unbiased like ours that can help you understand that, hey, you're trending to deliver your project or your solution or your service past what you originally planned, and these are all the deliverables that you can accelerate in order to come back in line with your original timeline, and that will reduce the anxiety that your customers feel. And ultimately, right, we talk about the trust equation. That's what puts customers at ease. That's what wins the trust. It's not that you're late. It's that your customers understand that, hey, there's a plan to catch up and to take care of me. And I have confidence in this organization that I'm partnering with, that they're going to be able to do that. So, you know, just kind of moving forward here, I think I said earlier that the trust equation is, you might have seen this online. I think it's important to understand how we build trust with customers, because ultimately people aren't going to buy from you if they don't trust you and if they don't like you. So to me, I feel like understanding how to build trust is important. And then we can talk about, there's 3 things that I'll talk about what you can optimize to accelerate this trust equation. But we need to understand it's our words, it's our actions, it's our emotions during the process, and it's the motives, right? Our motives, you know, do they align with our customers? And if they align with our customers, then we're truly creating a win-win situation. And so like to speak specifically about GUIDEcx, our motives are to reduce the time it takes for our customers to deliver their products and services. Our customers' motives are to deliver an amazing experience and create a ton more efficiencies through the onboarding experience, such that the customers can expand and increase their net revenue retention and their gross retention as well. But you know, as we go through this kind of process, right, is if we build trust with customers, right? People want to work with you. Your trust reduces the anxiety they have with you. I trusted that the pilot would in fact fly faster. I trusted that he understood all the different connections that were at risk of passengers that were on his flight, right? So do we build that same type of trust with our customers? And when we do, every department benefits. Everyone, it has a better and easier experience with the customer. And so when you talk about how to accelerate that, like I told you guys early on that I don't subscribe to kind of this thought process of it takes time to build trust. I think trust can be won in initial interactions. And if it's won, you build that. I think it's one because you're optimizing three things. You're optimizing speed, you're optimizing transparency, and you're optimizing engagement. And so if you talk about, there's an example, we're sharing a lot of airplane examples. I didn't expect to do this, but FedEx, they were the first unicorn in the United States, kind of first billion-dollar company. And Frederick Wallace, he is the founder of this company. He's quoted as saying the information about the package is as important as the package itself. And I think that's super interesting, right? It tells you that the customer is less concerned about the product or service and more concerned about the experience. And if you take a step back, FedEx, they were competing with the United States Postal Service, the government-backed entity with unlimited funds. And they understood that if we're going to compete with a company with unlimited funds and excel with a private entity at the time, we're going to need to work on creating the best experience that we possibly can, because they understood that just moving a package from point A to point B, that's a commodity. That didn't differentiate them. But the customer experience would. And I think that compares to the software SaaS space right now, right? As there continues to be so many companies popping up that are filling a ton of different needs, the software is becoming more and more commoditized. And because it's becoming more and more commoditized, the customer experience is becoming more and more of a differentiator to companies. And I think that's why there's this movement of the CX experience being moved to the forefront of the customer, of your company, of looking at and identifying, hey, how can I improve and optimize the customer experience? And so if we learn about kind of business to consumer visibility rock stars, we can learn a lot about how these companies focus on customer experience and more importantly, how they focus on transparency during the effort. I just saw a chat saying hello from Ghana. One of our employees is from Ghana, and he just got his United States citizenship a few months ago. So welcome, Arnold. But kind of, let's take a step back and just analyze what customers go through. And I showed this to Irina, and Irina got excited about this graph. If you guys don't follow Jake Dunlap on LinkedIn, he's a great person. He posts a lot of great content. This is one of the things he posted a few months back. But in this world, right, there's a lot of information available online, right? Customers are researching you more than ever. And so this sales process that's going through that's happening in your companies, it's moving more towards customer research first, then they reach out to you, get demoed or evaluate or go through a free trial. And when they decide to sign on the dotted line, right, they have done a ton of legwork in most cases. But that's the easy part. The hard part falls on this group, right? How do we create a win-win with a customer that just signed a product? Well, the first step is to recognize that there's a lot of challenges that we're going to have throughout this effort, right? We're going to have to implement them. We're going to have to manage change, which, just human nature, that's really difficult. People are not creatures of change in most cases. And so we have to manage that. We need to hold their hands. We need to reduce the anxiety they feel. We need to, manage inertia. There's going to be some people in that organization that do not want to change. And then there's also some people that leave, maybe not because of your implementation, but because of other outside variables that are at play in the companies that you're dealing with. And so these are all things that we need to create strategies around, how to create a strategy around resistance to change, to inertia, to leadership change. And we need to also recognize that this is the danger zone. This is like the toughest part of the customer experience. But if we get it right, it could substantially accelerate what your customer means to you long term. And so, yeah, go ahead, Irina.
You had it on the other side, and on the other slide, if you go back one slide, I wanted to ask you, how do you discuss a bit about resistance to change and about inertia? Because it's like, okay, you acquired a software product, yeah? So it was I would say a company decision or a team decision. How come resistance to change? Wasn't it I don't know, an assumed decision? Why do you think this resistance to change appear, and also inertia?
Yeah, so I think there's a pyramid that we kind of ask our customers at the start of our relationship, or like that I go over with our onboarding team on a monthly basis to make sure that we're paying attention to kind of the human aspect of the implementation experience, the value-driven guidance, the transparent guidance. And so how do you manage that change? I think that one, if you just if we go down this pyramid, you ask yourself, your organization this question: does your team understand the customer or barrel through a list of bullets, right? Are they more concerned about going through their process, or are they more concerned about holding their customer's hand through the process? Do you teach how to use the software or how to get value out of the software? So are you just talking about button pushing, or are you talking about the value that customers receive from the button pushing, right? The transparent guidance: are your customers in the know or always asking what's next? I have, I was in a conversation with one of our customers the other day, and he said, there's 3 questions that I cringe when customers ask me, these 3 questions. And I know that we failed if they asked any of these 3 questions. And they said, if I get asked, where are we at? When are we getting X? Or what's next? Those 3 questions tell me I failed, right? Those are questions that I should be giving answers to transparently through automation. Like, where are we at? When are we getting X? And what's next? And that's transparent guidance. I think the best companies in the world do things so customers don't have to call them. Okay. And like this flight I was on, the tight connection. When I made my connection, I was automatically worried that, wow, like that connection, I only had 20 minutes to get from my first initial flight that landed in Dallas to my next flight that was going to Florida. And I was worried that my bags didn't make it until I got a notification on my phone from Delta saying my bags were successfully boarded onto the plane I was on. And that automatically reduced my anxiety. And that's an example of a great company, Delta, being transparent with their experience, so their customers don't have to call their support line and panic about bags being missing. And they probably did get thousands of calls in their support line because people were worried about bags not making tight connections, or people checking in late and their bag not making it on the plane. That's just one example of how a transparent process reduces the anxiety of those that you serve. And then collaborative guidance. I think, do you engage customers or overwhelm customers? Are you trying to ask them to do too much, or are you feeding them in bite-sized chunks? And then confidence guidance.
How do you set up the balance? How do you know when it's too much, when is too little when it comes to this?
Yeah, so there's 2 aspects to that, to answer that question. The first aspect is when you're dealing with lots of times power users or your main point of contact on the customer side, the process of enabling them to manage their team is important to understand. And if you're just sending them an email and saying, hey, these are all the things we need your team to do, and not helping them understand maybe who from their team, what personas in their organization they need to engage, then you're asking a lot on that power user. And sometimes, you know, you'll notice that those people will just go dark on you. They'll stop responding to emails because they are overwhelmed. But an example of feeding them in bite-sized chunks would be helping them understand what all the deliverables are, but separating those deliverables out with you know, by personas that might be assigned those deliverables in those organizations. So helping them understand that, hey, like Serena, you don't have to do all of this, right? But what we're going to need from your team is we're going to need someone that understands your data structure. We're also going to need someone that can help us model out a process when an inbound lead comes into your website. And then we're also going to need you know, a stakeholder that understands financial forecasting. And so let's not talk about the deliverables yet. Let's talk about who those people are. And that will help that power user, Serena, in this example, know that they don't have to do everything. They just have to manage this process, right? And having a platform like GUIDEcx obviously helps you create some scale around that type of process. But that's the first aspect of it. The second is, yeah, help them understand all the things that need to be done to get to the finish line, but let's not ask them to do too much too fast. Let's feed them in bite-sized chunks. Let's just focus on 2 of the 50 deliverables, you know, in this next 2 days. And when you get those done, that'll notify me that you're done. We'll review those things, and then we'll move on to the next 3. And then let's notify people, you know, when they're almost up to bat, and let's notify people when they're overdue on items, and let's help them understand how the critical path is affected, and how that forecasted end date changes based on how fast people do things. And then analyzing your own process and helping you understand, hey, every time I tell the customer to do this, 90% of the time they get confused, right? Having data to help you understand where customers get stuck, that's super, super important. So yeah, kind of the 2 things I reviewed are, you know, persona-based assignments on the customer side. Don't just ask your power user to do everything. Handhold them through the process of who usually does these deliverables when you engage customers in companies that you're serving. And then the second is, you know, feed them in bite-sized chunks.
1 step at a time.
Yeah. In confident guidance, you still in customer confidence and incite customer apprehension. I think so. I'm a father of 4 girls. I was raised by amazing parents, and you know, my father unfortunately passed away about 2 years ago. And I considered him an amazing dad. And one of the things I asked him, I said, hey, Dad, like, what's one of the greatest pieces of advice you can give me as a new father? You know, I'm a newer father. And he says, everything you do and say should be designed to instill confidence in your children. And I think there's some parallels to that with our customers. Everything we do and say should instill confidence with customers that we serve. When people are confident, they're empowered to do more. I think that confidence unlocks human potential, right? It gives people the ability to work outside of themselves, to be confident, to do something that they might not think they can do. And so I think, you know, as you're analyzing your onboarding process, identifying things that, you know, where you can build the confidence in your customers throughout, you know, the deliverables that they accomplish. I don't think it's elementary to praise and to help the customer understand how awesome they did on the last deliverable they accomplished. Yeah, so I'll go on. Any other questions, Irina?
No, I reserve. I have a few, but I'm gonna reserve it at the very last. I wanna let you go through your presentation because I know that you still have a lot to share with the audience. So I'm gonna
Cool.
go
How much
silent.
time do we have? I want to be sure we leave time for questions, but what's our
We
time?
we still have 25 minutes, and if everyone agrees, we can extend 5 more minutes after the allocated time if you also have availability. So no worry about it.
Awesome. I appreciate the chat from Kathleen Clark. My papa is my best friend and he's going through it right now. That's awesome. Those lessons stay with you forever. Build that confidence and support. Thanks, Kathleen. So here's kind of a cool video. I think a lot of your daily jobs are like this gentleman that's trying to keep the train on the tracks, right? We have customers, we're trying to keep the train on the tracks, we're trying to evolve and help them on their way. And lots of times when an obstacle presents itself on the track, we solve things just in time. And but inevitably there's another obstacle. And we got to get creative and figure out how to remove that obstacle from the track. And we barely get through it. And I think if I can talk about one more aspect of the onboarding experience that can improve your net revenue retention and kind of build that trust in your customer experience, it would be this. 90% of the customers we deal with are probably moving through the process efficiently, right? If you're, once you have your process set up, you're answering those 3 questions that we talked about at the start of the podcast or start of this webinar about, hey, do the customers know when they're going to get the good product or service they're signed up for? Do they know who's responsible for what, and do they know what they purchased? Once you kind of identify those problems, build your process around answering those questions, then you're starting to hum. Inevitably, you're going to have customers that have emergencies. And if I could just share one more personal story with you all. My 3rd daughter, Gwen, was born not breathing. And we were at a local hospital, kind of a smaller, it was a brand new hospital. And the doctor kind of came to us and said, hey, we have a bit of an emergency. We don't have a ventilator in this hospital. And we need a ventilator. And so we're going to bring a helicopter in and we're going to lifeline her to a hospital in Salt Lake. That immediately created panic with my wife and I. And it created panic because we started to understand that this hospital did not have a NICU. It did not have a process to kind of move a baby off the assembly line and help that baby with maybe a little more attention that's needed from all the other babies that were being born at this hospital. Ultimately, Gwen was, she spent 3 weeks in the NICU. She recovered. She had to get this fluid called surfactant applied via a ventilator that would help her lungs expand. And she was a premature baby, and she's our most rambunctious one right now. So everything's well, all good. But if you kind of apply that example to your customer experience, I think, you have customers that are going to go through your process and they're going to, be fine. And you're going to pass them on to your client success team. And so when your client success team gets it, they're going to be healthy and they're going to be breathing. And now it's just, hey, how do we help them grow? But if you're pushing, customers down the line that are unhealthy and you kind of push them onto your client success team and they have significant problems breathing, they're not going to be able to grow. They're going to churn and they're not going to expand and they're going to contract, and ultimately they're going to not survive. And so creating a process around how to create a NICU within your own onboarding team and put your customers at ease so that they know that you have a plan when things that are unplanned happen. It won't feel like the gentleman on this train that's trying to solve obstacles in the moment. You can take the train off the tracks, put them on a different track, and help that customer be healthy before we pass them on to the client success org. And so just some things to think about as you optimize kind of this danger zone. It's well worth the investment to over support and over handhold customers within this phase of process. And I promise you, it will pay off in spades as you experience not only increased gross retention, because the first 30 days you win the renewal, in my opinion, but you'll also experience significant expansion, which will drive your net revenue retention higher. I'd also focus on speed, right? The best companies in the world do things quickly through effective scaling. I always say that if you can systematize your process, meaning that, create some repetition in your process. I understand not all implementation experiences are the same. There's always variability in your onboarding effort. But to the extent you can, create, specific milestones that every customer goes through, and maybe the deliverables within those milestones might be different. But the more repetitive your process can be, the more measurable it will become. And the more measurable it is, now you have the ability to optimize it, right? You can't optimize things you can't measure. And so, if you kind of follow that order, right? Like, look at your process, identify, hey, how repetitive can I make this process? Let's start measuring, where customers might get stuck in this process so that we can optimize this process going forward. And once you put those three things in motion, then you can start working on speed. And the best companies in the world do things quickly through effective scaling. And you can work on time to value. We drink our own champagne here at our company at GUIDEcx, right? We use our own solution. And we've gone from a 90-day implementation early on to now we implement our customers in 12 days. And that didn't happen overnight. That happened through iteration, learning, measuring, optimizing, going through that process over and over and over, and perfecting our recipe. And as our product evolves and creates more features and functions, you have to iterate and go through that process over and over and over, right? Because your product becomes more and more complex over time based on you meeting your customer demand and building new features and functions in your product to help customers evolve. And so the other thing I think you'd evaluate in your process is transparency. Campbell Soup, I love Campbell Soup. This is the CEO, Denise here. The single most important ingredient in the recipe for success is transparency, because transparency builds trust. I would say transparency is the conduit for trust. And then engagement. If everyone is moving together, then success takes care of itself. So one of the things that we did that I think is super interesting is we did a study within our organization. We have a pretty significant business intelligence team in our company. And I asked our business intelligence team, I said, hey, let's analyze projects that are going through our system, and let's identify kind of what behaviors represent success. And one of the things we found is across 100,000 projects we measured, we did this about 6 months ago. When one individual was engaged on the client system, on the client side, so you invited just one, if you're just working with one person on the client side, and that's the only person who you engaged with to launch your product, goods, or services, 61% of those projects were on schedule. Not great, but when we saw 5 individuals on the client side involved in a project, 91% were on schedule. And one of the things we did when we learned this is we felt like, wow, okay, well, what was the reason? Well, this goes back to persona-based assignments, right? Helping and empowering your power users understand, who else in their organization do they need to involve in order to be successful. Another thing that we thought was interesting was that when, like Abby, let's say one of the customer side individuals missed a task, 4 other people knew that she missed a task on the customer side. So there's some intrinsic accountability in that process that, everyone else understood kind of who was responsible for what, but more importantly, in a non-intrusive, non-intimidating way, you had people that, on the customer side team that knew who was missing their items. You didn't have to be the bad guy, in other words. And so I think one other thing that was also interesting that's not on this slide was customers overwhelmingly were completing their deliverables on our platform after their business hours. And this is interesting, right? Because oftentimes we're working with customers to implement our solutions, But we forget that these users that we're working with on the customer side have their day jobs. Like they're doing their own job on a daily basis. And then we're piling something on top of all that work they're supposed to do to implement our solution. And the only time they have to work on these things, in most cases, is after hours. And so, yeah, as you design and optimize that onboarding flow, ask yourself, like, how are you empowering users to work after hours? Like, are you giving them enough information? Do they have a platform where they can do things in self-serve without your hand-holding effort in the moment? And so some great learnings on how to
Peter,
do that. Right?
I wanna ask you something, and but I know that we are almost running out of time. But I'm curious of two things on the other slide. You mentioned about the insight, which is not presented, that you found out that people were spending extra hours, or they were resolving tasks, but not in the business hours. What did you guys change? So having this information, how did this information help you change something? What did you change? Knowing this, what did you change in your processes?
Yeah, so in our specific process, right, we use our own solution, and so we have the ability to embed training guides. We have the ability to embed assets and collateral, infographics, kind of more substantial directions to help customers self-serve through some deliverables we felt like we can throw over the fence to their side to do on their own. And so we kind of created more content and made our content richer, if you will, to enable them to do things after hours. Whereas before, lots of times we had to be on the call. Like I'll give you a specific example. One of the more complex things we do in our onboarding experience is we have to authenticate their domain and add CNAME entries into their DNS settings. It sounds very complex and intimidating, but it's really not that. We just have to have the right person on the phone that has access to the domain's DNS, and we have to have them add their CNAME entries. Once they added their entries, then they had to call us and say, all right, we've added them, and then we have to test and verify and kind of ping their domain and authenticate those. So it's kind of a back and forth process that kind of required us to be on the phone with them. Now, it was really hard for us to get on the phone with the right person during the day, right? Because everyone had their day jobs. And so oftentimes this was a bottleneck into our process, right? It would take, and not exaggerating, 2 weeks to get the appropriate person on the phone that can help us authenticate DNS entries into their domain registrar. And so we felt like, okay, well, how do we optimize just that little experience within our implementation effort and create a way where we can enable this, individual in the organization that has access to their domain registrar to add their DNS entries and then authenticate themselves, right, without having to call us. And so through kind of creating a very intuitive we call in our system, we call it a task. We created kind of very intuitive instructions. We had kind of a training guide attached to those instructions. And we empowered that individual to do all of that on their own and verify that they successfully added the CNAME entries on their own without ever having to call us. And that just simple investment reduced 2 weeks out of our process. It took 2 weeks, 14 days out of our time to value. And you think about, well, how does that affect a user's confidence in our solution, right? Like, time kills all deals, I would say. People get frustrated when they don't see things moving and progressing. If I don't get notified where my package is at after I order something on Amazon, I immediately think I got scammed. And customers are no different. And so helping accelerate key initiatives like that, but oftentimes like this domain, this person that had access to the domain registrar wasn't a user of our system. He wasn't going to be in our system on a daily basis. He wasn't going to be receiving value out of our system, but he was, or she was, inhibiting our main users from getting value out of the system. And they didn't oftentimes know how to hold that guy accountable or that gal accountable to doing this said activity. And so that's just one really, really specific example of how we kind of involved another person in the organization, helped that power user understand what he or she needed to do. And then more importantly, had, automated follow-up when that task or deliverable is overdue. So everyone understood that we're waiting on that person and I don't have to be the bad guy throwing that person under the bus.
It's like Kathleen is saying, it's those little tweaks that make massive change. And yeah, you're right, Kathleen.
Yeah, the little things in the process as we tweak. But we wouldn't know that was a bottleneck in our process if we weren't measuring it, right? So oftentimes we kind of go through our internal checklist and we're trying to get things done. And sometimes, customers are just sitting and waiting without anyone knowing that there's just one task that's not getting done that's holding up the whole process. So bells and whistles should go off when those things happen in your process, so you're aware of it.
Another thing, knowing that the North Star metric for GUIDEcx is 5 individuals on the client side involved in a project, couldn't someone easily fake it? I would say, where knowing this, we're having this metric, wouldn't it be easier for the team, I don't know, for the implementation team to make sure that they have 5 people on the project, regardless of who they are? It's just bring everyone and make it in there, because this is what counts. How do you balance this? How do you know that those 5 people should be, I don't know, real personas that are actually involved in, and it doesn't help to actually fake it or artificially influence that North Star metric?
Yeah, well, I think step one is just what you said, is understanding, like sitting together with your team and having, a real conversation around, hey, who do we need on the customer side in order for us all to be successful? Let's talk about the personas that need to be involved. And then step 2 would be, all right, let's look at our process and let's assign those personas to specific deliverables within our implementation experience. And then over time, let's manage which personas are the most difficult to deal with, right? Is it the domain registrar, the person that has access to the domain registrar, the IT manager that no one knows where he's at or she's at, and they're always telling you how important they are, right? We all have, specific users and organizations we have a harder time dealing with. And then when you identify that, then and only then, right, you engage your implementation team and help them understand the importance of inviting those personas. And a persona doesn't have to be assigned a task. Maybe one of the personas is the contract signer. And I want to create automation such that when any person on his or her team misses a deliverable, that person is notified, so that I don't have to be the bad guy. Basically, you're empowering the contract signer, the person that oftentimes sends you the check, to know whether his team is meeting the expectations that we're setting or missing them without me having to throw them under the bus. Another common complaint that some people have is, hey, there's too many hands in the cookie jar, right? Like I don't want to create more work for myself when more people are involved in this process. Well, you can solve that with visibility, right? You can kind of create different layers of permissions and visibility based on, who's involved in the project. Maybe the contract signer shouldn't see the whole plan. I just wanted him to be visible. I just want him to only see overdue tasks, right? See what his team's not doing that I need his or her help with holding his team accountable to do in the future. Maybe this IT manager, I just want him seeing the only task that he's responsible for. And maybe a relationship with, hey, if you miss this task, it's going to move everyone. It's going to move our forecasted end date past our original planned end date. So this is why we need you to meet this responsibility. And then maybe your power user sees everything. They see kind of the whole plan, including what we're doing. And I'm a big fan of transparency. Here in the U.S., we have, probably similar to where you're at in Romania, you have restaurants that oftentimes you go in and you kind of go down an assembly line and you pick and choose which ingredients you want in your food. I think that's pretty new. In the last like 10, 15 years, it seems like those restaurants are becoming more and more popular. But as I analyze that process, I think, wow, like the reason I'm confident in eating that food is I saw it being prepared. Like I saw the ingredients going into it, and I knew that like hair wasn't getting in my food. I knew they didn't put in, olives. I don't like olives, right? I saw them skip that. And so to the extent you can show your customers what ingredients you're putting into the customer experience, that's going to build confidence in them. And that's going to, encourage them to create, have a good experience eating your food, right? They built what you made. and so they're going to appreciate it more. And when they appreciate it more, they're going to engage with it more, and they're going to push their users to use it because they're going to see all the work that went into building it. It's their plate. So yeah. And to accelerate, we can go to questions, but I think, the proof is in the pudding, right? We see across our customer base, it's not uncommon that when you follow these principles, that you're going to reduce your implementation time by half. And you're going to also improve the efficiency of your team, right? 4x increase in project management capacity. You're going to need less meetings. Once again, the greatest companies in the world make it so your customers don't have to call you. You don't have to have as many meetings with your customers because all that information will be, in the moment, ready for them to see through a platform. And you're going to be on time. And all these things optimize net revenue retention because customers will trust you more. And those are kind of the key takeaways, right? When you do things quickly and predictably, people want to work with you. When you're transparent, you're going to build more trust and reduce your anxiety that customers have with you. And, and you're also going to be easy to work with. And everyone in your company will benefit from that experience. And in kind of when you look at the leading cause of churn, I would say the first step to optimizing net revenue retention is retaining customers. You can't create retention if you don't retain. And you kind of look at what the leading causes of customer churn are. And in onboarding, a challenging onboarding experience is difficult. If you're trying to optimize retention and net revenue retention. So that being said, thank you. I'd love any time for questions, and this is like asking me to talk about one of my kids, so I get super passionate about this topic.
Thank you very much, Peter. But it's not actually a question; it's more like a request. Kathleen asked if we can share the presentation, so just send me the presentation, and I'm gonna send it to whoever wants to have it. Of course, the presentation is also in the recording, and you can watch it and rewatch it whenever you want. Now it's the time to ask questions. I do have a lot of questions to ask for Peter, but I interfered a lot. So yes, Candice will send also the recording and the presentation. I'll wait for people to ask questions. In the meantime, I want to ask you. There's not sure if it's a misconception or not. Whenever we are talking about state-of-the-art customer experience, where we are talking about high-touch CS models, we assume that technology doesn't have a place in this. Is it true or false? Do we need technology even if we have a one-on-one interaction? Can technology help us also in this models, customer success models, or strategies, approaches?
Yeah, I think the way to answer that question is, if you take a step back and analyze the customer touch points that you have in your organization, and you classify them as reactive or proactive. If you're always reacting to customers' questions when they're calling you, and find yourself in a moment of trying to answer everything they're asking, then I would analyze, hey, what are they asking? Like the Delta example, right? They probably had thousands of phone calls coming into their support line about bags that people were worried about didn't get on the plane, and And what Delta did is they said, well, okay, well, how do we answer that question transparently through automation, through technology, to improve the customer experience? Well, they created a notification in our app. It notified customers that their bags got on the planes. Customers' anxiety levels were reduced. They trusted the process more. And it freed up time within their staff to be more proactive, right? And so I always say, if technology can help you be more proactive through answering questions automatically that most customers have during your process, then it has a place in your strategy. If it can't, then maybe it doesn't. But I think going back to kind of how repetitive can you make your process, right? When you kind of look at all the support tickets that come in during the implementation process, like is there a common theme? Do they always ask the same question? And then kind of take a step back and say, hey, how do I answer that question transparently through automation, through technology? And the best companies in the world do this really well. The best companies make it so you never have to call them. I never call Jeff Bezos up to ask him where my package is at. I never blow him up when my package is 3 days late, because I have confidence that I'm still going to get it. And if I don't, he has a process where I can easily click a button and get a refund.
Lori asks you, we have a question. Lori asks you, what if you have a product that is supply chain dependent? Products can be late and out of your hands. Is there anything to help communication with least amount of frustration for the customer?
Yeah, so great question, Lori. I recently went through kind of a construction process, and I was working with a general contractor who didn't give me any insight into why we were late. And I was super frustrated because I didn't understand, or, I immediately thought that this general contractor didn't care enough about me to give me insight and perspective. When in reality, like, it was the plumber that was missing his tasks, right? It was the plumber that was causing the whole project to go overdue. And if he would have told me that, hey, we have a really challenging time getting these plumbers to come on site. There's a material shortage, and this is why. Even though it was out of his hands, even though that he didn't manage this plumber, I would have still been put at ease and understood that, hey, it's not the general contractor's fault. Like, he's doing the best he can. But this plumber is the one that's failing us. That insight and perspective alone creates a better customer experience for me. It helps me kind of plan around, what this potential challenge might mean to me. And so to your question, right, what if a product that is a supply chain dependent, what if you're late and the reason, is uncontrollable, it's out of your hands? I think transparency helps a lot. Transparency is the conduit for trust. And to the extent that you feel comfortable helping your customer understand what we're waiting on and that it is out of our hands, at least now the customer is going to take some of the blame off of you. In my last company, we worked with automotive dealers. We had to integrate with manufacturers like Toyota and Ford, Chevy. And these manufacturers were very slow sending us data. We created a process to help the dealer understand that, hey, this manufacturer is late. We're waiting. This is holding up everything. And what happened was dealers would start calling the manufacturers for us. I understand that doesn't happen all the time, and you don't probably want that to happen all the time, maybe because some of your suppliers you don't want managed by your customers. But that's an example of how a transparent process helped ultimately speed up everything.
Peter, thank you very much for your availability, for your answers. I know that get in touch. So I encourage everyone to get in touch with you to ask one-on-one questions. You are available. I know that you do not mind receiving messages and questions. So get in touch with Peter. Get in touch with us. And thank you all for attending today's webinar session. It was a real pleasure, and I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Irina.
Thank you. Have a lovely day ahead. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.